Hello, welcome back to Astro Mary. As we discussed in the last episode, we were looking at birth charts to determine their chart shape, because finding out the shape of your chart gives you a bit of an idea of what the energies of the chart are like. And the chart shapes are splash, locomotive, bowl, bucket, splay, bundle, and is that all of them? Splash, locomotive, bowl, bucket, splay, and bundle. And I asked for you to go to astro.com, put your data in, and get your chart up and have a look at it and see what shape it is. And in the meantime, I've had a number of volunteers who've said they're perfectly happy for me to discuss their charts, so that's what I'm going to be doing. and I'm just going to be demonstrating a little bit about how much you can tell about a person from their chart. Well, maybe not you can tell, but somebody that understands astrology when you get to the space of being able to understand it. And but because these are early starter episodes, I'll come on to more complex things later on. I'm just going to be discussing today in this episode about the chart shapes. So I'm not going to be going into things like sun signs, moon signs, ascendants. We're going to get all of that later on. So my first volunteer is a young lady called Miriam, and she's a teacher, she's married, and she has 2 teenage boys, and she lives in America, in the USA, and her chart shape is very interesting. She's got the majority of her planets in 2 segments of the chart. So she's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planets on one side of the circle and 3 planets on the other. Now, because they're not directly opposite each other, which would be in a seesaw, this is called a locomotive because she's got the 2 little clusters of things opposite each other but not directly opposite. There's just a small gap between one segment of the things and the other. Now, for a chart to be a locomotive, there will be a bundle of planets on one side and then a bundle of planets on the other side, but they're not directly opposite each other. So for it to be a seesaw, which is a number of planets opposite another, they have to be directly opposite. So I'm sure you'd be able to work that out by looking at something. So if you looked at something and you could see lots of things here, lots of things there, directly opposite each other, that would be seesaw. But in Miriam's case, she has locomotive because not everything is opposite, but there are segments of the chart that are on opposing sides of the chart. So we're dividing the chart up into 12, and we're assuming that one side of the chart is 6 segments and the other side of the chart is the other 6 segments. And in her case, she has just one, what we call house, in between her 2 segments on one side, and 3 houses on the other side, separating the other segments of the chart. So locomotive. So what's a locomotive all about? Locomotive chart is someone that doesn't do things in a regular manner. They want to use irregularity to things. So they'll be chugging along, and then all of a sudden they'll run out of steam, need to be reactivated again to be able to continue. So if you're thinking about your own personal energies and you have a locomotive chart, then allow yourself some space in between whatever it is you're doing. So in Miriam's case, she's got 3 very, very segmented empty sections. That everybody's going to have empty houses, but in her case she's got 3 on one side, 1 on the other, and so she does need to allow herself some space in between doing a project or a thing or whatever she's up to before she gets on to the next thing. So those spaces in the chart, they're as important as the occupied parts of the chart. So thank you very much, Miriam, for submitting your chart to me and let me have a look at it. Very interesting. We'll come into some more information at a later date. But you did ask, I think you were asking whether or not you are on the right path, and the answer is yes, but I'd have to go into more detail about why that is. But yes, you are doing the right thing. You are definitely on your path. Now the next chart this young lady sent to me, her name is Rachel. And she's the mother to 5 children, one of which who is in heaven. And her chart shape is very much the seesaw. So let me just call it up, because I haven't mentioned her and I haven't got her chart up. So here we go, I'm looking at it now. So her chart shape is definitely the seesaw. So we've got 5 planets opposite 5 planets, and they're very, very much opposite each other. However, in her case, in Rachel's case, the 5 planets on one side are pretty much clustered close together, whilst the 5 planets on the other side of the circle are far more spread out. So if you have a seesaw chart, depending on what sort of shape it is, just use your creative part of your brain and sort of think, well, what would a seesaw represent? And it represents someone that definitely needs to divide their personal energies between 2 distinct properties. So in Rachel's case, she's a mum. That's a 24/7 full-time job, and on the other side of it, she works in education, working one-to-one with a child with special educational needs. So there's sort of a caring capacity going on there. So she's doing the right thing again in her chart. She's manifesting her chart's energies correctly by doing the very altruistic type of work, and then on the other side of it being the mother. So again, she is utilizing very much the conditions and aspects of her chart. So seesaw, she's got 2 major, totally separate and different elements to her life. The work is incredibly important to her, but also is the motherhood. So thank you very much, Rachel, for submitting your chart to me. Very interesting. Thank you. And our next person we have here, and her name is Claire France. I hope I've pronounced it rightly. I presume France is pronounced as in the place. And she comes, I think she lives in America. I'm almost correct about that. And she was born not in America. She was born a long, long way away in Morocco. And her chart is predominantly 100%, yes, it's a bowl. So we've got 12 segments in the chart. She's got her planets in 6 segments of it. So her chart is very, very much one-sided. So this is somebody that's fab, doing the things on the side of the stuff where she's got all her planets, and then maybe not quite so astute or experienced or whatever in the empty parts of her chart. So she does have an enormous segment of her chart, 6 houses. I think it's not quite 6, it's 5 and 3/4 of her chart is empty of the major planets. So she would feel better having an enormous amount of time to herself. So I always consider the empty parts of the chart, depending on where they are and how massive they are, you need to have time doing nothing. And in Claire France's case, because she has a large segment of her chart empty, then she also needs to have a time to herself where she's not with other people, and to do her own thing and to be almost totally on her own. And then that fill bit of her chart, that's where she can communicate and be with other people, etc., and get out there and do stuff. But a bowl person feels best being able to focus on wherever it is their focus is, but to be able to focus on that without being interrupted by others. So the quickest way to pee off somebody with a bowl chart is to get them to multitask. I mean, Claire France has got her sun in Gemini, but we're not discussing sun signs, so Geminis do like to multitask. But she also has 3 planets in Taurus, which doesn't. So I'd say, she would probably feel heaps better allowing herself an amount of time to herself, and then another amount of time being with other people, so that she's got that time to focus on those things that she loves to focus on. So that's a bowl chart. People with bowl charts shapes have their planets on one side of the circle. So we're talking about 6 houses or 6 segments, whatever you want to call them, that are occupied and 6 that are empty. You can actually have bowl charts that are smaller than that. I tend to think you could sort of have 4 houses and then 6 empty. But once we get to smaller than that, I have got a client who's got 3 houses occupied and 7 empty. That I'd more say that was a cluster chart. But yeah, so that's a bowl. And so thank you very much, Claire France, for giving me your chart to have a look at and to be able to discuss today. And next up we have Emma. Now Emma's chart's very interesting. Let me just call her chart up, and it's decided to disappear on me. Come back, Emma, where are you? Her chart shape is, where are we? Emma's chart is, now she's got a chart rather similar to mine. I'd call that a splay because it's an uneven distribution of the planets around the circle. A splash is where there's an equal amount of distance between the planets all the way around the circle. And in a splay it's unevening, so there's a little cluster here, a little cluster there, but the planets go all the way around the circle, so there's never more than 2 houses empty. And I think in Emma's case, yes, she hasn't got anything more than 2 houses empty. I mean, one's got car in it, depends whether or not you're going to include that. And splay and splash people, but splay especially, people that have a splay chart, definitely need to divide their time up into teeny little segments. So to be doing a small amount of something and then go off and do something else and then another small amount of something, so their life isn't either or, their life is plus. Yeah, so they feel better doing lots of things and having small rests, and then doing another bit of thing and having a small rest. So in Emma's case, she's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, can I count here? 1, 2, 3, 4. She's got 5 empty houses and 5 completed, occupied houses. And she would feel far more fluffy if she were to divide her time up into doing small amounts of things for a small amount of time and then going on to something else. So energetically wise, to be doing the same thing all the time ain't going to work, but equally changing too much is going to be a head mess. So it's a little bit of something and then a break, and then another little something and a break. And I know Emma writes, so what I'd suggest to her is that she writes and gives herself a break. That's what I have to do. I'll write so many thousand words and I have to get up and go and do something. I cannot sit down for any vast lengths of time in writing. I just fade. So when you're looking about how to make your life feel better, if you have a splay uneven distribution of planets around the circle with gaps in between, then I would recommend that you do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Don't put all of your, horrible expression, but don't put all of your eggs into one basket. So thanks, Emma, thanks for your chart. And next we have Kelly. Now Kelly has it's another SeeSaw chart. It's funny, isn't it, when you ask for people to send you things and they have a similar thing going on for them. So let's just call up Kelly. Here she is. And Kelly's now, is it SeeSaw or is it Locomotive? That's a point. It's Locomotive actually, not SeeSaw, because it's not all opposite. So Kelly has planets in 1, 2, 3, 4 houses, opposite planets in 2 houses, but they're not directly opposite. So taking us back to what we spoke about earlier about Locomotive, is that you chug along, you do stuff, and then you need to have a break and then get on with something again. In her case, she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 empty houses opposite, well, not opposite, but yeah, not quite opposite, 2 houses. So again, this is somebody that needs to have a considerable amount of time to themselves, which is a bit tricky because I believe Kelly's a mum to 2 young ladies, so having time to yourself is probably near enough impossible, but maybe you can lock yourself in the bathroom occasionally. In the UK, bathroom means the place where you have a bath, not as in America. Bathroom is what we call in England a toilet, but somewhere where you could just lock yourself away and have some time to yourself. Her planets, Kelly's planets, are very close together. She's got a lot of conjunctions, so there's a lot of planets that are pretty much squished together. Unlike in Miriam's case, where she does have a locomotive chart, but her planets are a little bit more spread out. Because in Kelly's case, she's 4 houses separate to 2 houses, but again with only 1 house in between. So life will take on an energy, you'll be moving forwards, and then there's sort of like 10 steps forwards, 2 steps back, but life isn't smooth. Locomotive charts, I don't really classify them being smooth. They always seem to present to the person an internal challenge, one that they're capable of recovering from and doing the best with, but it does present more of a challenge when there's that uneven energy, so it's going chug, and then needing to sort of slow down a bit. So thank you very much, Miriam, Rachel, Claire, Emma and Kelly, for giving me your charts today to have a chat about. That's just a little bit of an insight into, we've discussed locomotive, we've discussed bowl, we've discussed splay, and in my next episode we'll discuss the ones we haven't discussed today. So hopefully the people that have submitted me their charts will cover the other ones. So we'll need to be covering the bucket and the bundle, so that's the 2, and the splash. So splash, bucket and bundle, which we haven't discussed today. So I hope you found that reasonably interesting. I hope you've managed to get to astro.com and have a look at your chart shape. We're not doing anything astrological other than just looking at chart shapes. We're just taking the chart from the outside, giving it that teeny bit of observation, just looking at the energies within it, because the planets represent your internal energies, and once you have a little grasp of what they're like, it can make life a whole lot easier. So thanks very much for listening. Speak to you soon.